This is Agent Mode AI. I'm Abby. Two of the largest standalone enterprise agentic AI vendors moved into platform parents in 8 weeks at the end of 2025. ServiceNow completed its MoveWorks acquisition in December 2025 against the originally announced $2.85 billion consideration. Automation Anywhere closed its Icera acquisition on the 11th of November 2025. Today, we're walking AM145. Switching AI vendors in 2026 is a contracts problem before it is a tech problem, and 7 clause families repeatedly create the lock-in most enterprises only discover at year 2 of the relationship.
I'm Avery. Why is the contract layer the binding one in 2026?
3 forces converged. Vendor consolidation accelerated, ServiceNow and MoveWorks, Automation Anywhere and Icera, and the broader pattern across the second half of 2025 placed existing customers on the acquirer's renewal calendar with the acquirer's master service agreement template waiting on the other side. Model deprecations became a recurring contract event. OpenAI retired the GPT-4 base model in mid-2024 and has continued a quarterly deprecation cadence. Anthropic publishes a model lifecycle policy that puts most production model versions on a 12-month observable horizon. Google Vertex AI tracks similar cadence, and the first wave of multi-year enterprise agentic AI contracts is approaching renewal. Deals signed in 2024 are hitting their first renewal cycle through 2026 and 2027. Some of those customers have learned the optimistic adoption deck Klarna walked back on the 8th of May 2025, reverting from 700 agent automation to human agents in customer service is the modal trajectory rather than the exception.
Clause 1. Data Portability Scope.
Most enterprise master service agreements commit to exporting customer data on termination. The procurement question is what the contract defines as customer data. Common scope language includes prompts, completions, and uploaded documents. Common exclusions, sometimes explicit and sometimes by silence, include derived embeddings, retrieval indices, fine-tuned model weights, persistent agent memory, conversation traces, and intermediate planning state. The exclusions are precisely the categories that took the most operational effort to build, and they are the categories that make the agent useful on day 1 of the successor platform. The redline language defines customer data to include all customer-specific state produced by the system during operation, including derived, embedded, indexed, and intermediate forms.
Clause 2. Model deprecation rights.
Vendor terms commonly reserve the right to retire underlying models with advance notice. The notice period varies. Microsoft's Azure OpenAI model retirement policy commits to specific timelines and at least one alternative model during transition. Many smaller vendors are silent. Without a minimum notice, 90 days is operationally sufficient for the vendor and operationally inadequate for an enterprise running a regression suite, security review, and governance sign-off against the deprecated model. The redline language asks for a contractual minimum notice period. 12 months is the asking number, 6 months is the floor, plus parallel availability of the deprecated and successor model for a stated overlap window, and a documented mapping of deprecation-driven prompt changes the vendor will provide rather than push to the customer.
Clause 3. Sub-processor expansion.
Vendor master service agreements typically include a subprocessor list that may be updated by the vendor during the term. The customer's recourse on disagreement is usually a termination right with limited compensation. Agentic AI subprocessor lists include not just infrastructure providers, but model providers, vector database providers, and increasingly third-party model context protocol server operators. A vendor that adds a new model provider mid-term has materially changed the system the customer signed for. The red line, explicit ownership of customer-derived output by the customer, vendor indemnification against third-party intellectual property claims subject to documented use within the agreed parameters, and a defined notification and defense protocol when claims arise.
Clause 5. Pricing tier rebalancing.
Most agentic AI commercial contracts in 2026 are token-metered with enterprise minimum commits and discount tiers layered on top. The risk is not the published rate, It is the vendor's reserved right to revise the rate card on advance notice and the fair use definitions that reset on renewal. A pilot's token per action profile understates production by a wide margin, and adoption volume forecasts built on pilot data routinely miss by 5 to 10 times at scale. Source: our estimate. Once volume deviates, the vendor's rate revision right turns the contract into a metered one without a renegotiation event. The red line: rate card stability for the contract term, a usage cap notification protocol that triggers escalation rather than invoice surprise, and a fair use definition fixed at signature rather than reset on renewal.
Clause 6. Agent uptime service level definitions.
Standard software as a service level agreements define uptime as the application programming interface responding within latency bounds. For an agentic system, the operational question is not whether the model interface is up, it is whether the agent, including its retrieval, tool integrations, planning loop, and approval gate execution, is functioning. A 99.9% model availability service level can coexist with frequent agent failures driven by retrieval timeouts, tool call errors, or context window limits the service level does not cover. The red line: agent-level service level definitions that measure successful task completion, not just model interface uptime. Where the vendor argues the customer's tools and integrations are out of scope, separate the vendor-controlled portion of the agent stack from the customer-controlled portion and write service levels against each.
Clause 7. Audit evidence retention.
Article 16 of the EU AI Act, applicable to deployers of high-risk AI systems from the 2nd of August 2026, requires deployers to operate the system in accordance with the provider's instructions and to retain logs for at least 6 months. The deployer cannot satisfy the retention obligation if the vendor terminates access to the audit substrate at contract end, or if the export format does not satisfy the Article 12 record-keeping structural requirements. The red line: a contractual audit log retention obligation that extends past contract termination by at least the regulatory floor, 6 months for Article 16. Longer for sector retention, such as the 6-year Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act requirement and the 7-year Sarbanes-Oxley requirement, in a documented, machine-readable format compatible with the 14-field Article 12 audit substrate. The export must include provenance, the planned versus executed action distinction, and policy version stamps that bear prompt and response export does not.
The procurement playbook.
3 artifacts run in parallel during a live procurement. The 60-question agentic AI request for proposal surfaces the vendor's posture before contract drafting begins. Section 5 asks the exit and lock-in questions, whose verbal answers should appear later as contract language. The 8-provision exit clause framework translates the verbal commitments into binding contract language. And the AI Master Service Agreement Red Team Checklist, RES 005, walks the 7 clauses against vendor paper before signature, with the red line language for each clause and the priority order the procurement team should ask in. The 7 clauses in this episode are the procurement side red flags. The 8 provisions are the legal side enforceable form. They map to each other.
Change of control.
2 questions before signature. Does your master service agreement require notification on change of control? Does it grant termination for convenience rights at preserved pricing on change of control? Without the first, you can be moved on to the acquirer's terms without a contract event you control. Without the second, the acquirer can repaper you at their pricing on the next renewal. The MoveWorks, ServiceNow, and Icera Automation Anywhere deals from late 2025 are working examples. Existing customers landed on the acquirer's renewal calendar with the acquirer's template waiting on the other side.
Final word.
The technical team will get blamed for what is in fact a procurement and legal failure that occurred before the first agent was deployed. The 7 clauses are the procurement deck checklist. The red line language for each is in RES 005, the AI Master Service Agreement Red Team Checklist. the MoveWorks and Icera announcements, the OpenAI and Anthropic and Google Vertex deprecation pages, the Microsoft Azure model retirement policy, the Microsoft customer copyright commitment, the Bloomberg Klarna reversal, and the EU AI Act Articles 12 and 16 are linked at agentmodeai.com/holding/claim equals AM145. AM145 is holding. The next review is on the 6th of July, 2026.
Holding up. See you next Sunday.